Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Phil Svitek, and joined alongside today, my dear friend, Jen Golden. Now, of course, she is not here because she's my friend. She has a whole list of credentials that warrant her being a part of the show. She's an incredible host. She's just an amazing all-around person, and she has a vast knowledge of now social media, thanks to Open Influence, correct?
Correct. That is where I
Awesome.
work. I'm an account director there.
Awesome. So, I guess one of the interesting things would be like, how has social media evolved from your perspective, right? Because there's so much talk about like, how poisonous Facebook or Instagram is and this and that. And for my money's worth, it's just a tool and it's how you use it. And I think to a degree, some humans are ill prepared to use it, but I think it can be a wonderful tool at the same time. So I'm just curious your thoughts since, you work in the space.
Definitely. So it started as a way to share content and stay in touch with people. That was what Facebook was all about. So it has morphed since to be a resource to brands where they can get their products or services in the hands of influencers, people with a big audience or the right audience, more importantly, and be an advocate for them, a brand advocate, where they're creating these mini commercials or mini ads basically on behalf of the brands. That's cheap labor by standards of what it used to be to put together an entire production or a photo shoot or hire models and then a director and all of these things that cost an arm and a leg. And now we've got all of these mini relatable brand advocates creating their own content. They're like creative directors essentially, and they're marketing brands left and right, and there is absolutely real value there. Of course, though, there is the flip side where there's the comparison game or people that have fake followers and are frauds, or people that are really not brand safe and they're a bit polarizing. So brands don't obviously want to align with those people. And that's some of the vetting we do on our end before having influencers partner with brands. We actually work on the brand side. So I have the behind the scenes of what it takes to vet influencers and also what it takes for a brand to select one. They hire us as a third party to manage all of that and scrutinize on their behalf as a leg of their own team. So we have to have all of their their preferences in mind and what will actually move the needle, not just somebody with a follower account that's large, but is their audience the right audience? Will they promote the brand properly? Are they taking another campaign just because they like money and they're churning them out, or because they actually really stand behind that product and can sell it in a relatable way and make their audience really feel like they're invested and that they too should be invested? So there's good and bad to every coin. There's two sides, of course, and so we see it all. There's good influencers and there's bad influencers. There's people that are great to work with and there's people that are crappy to work with. But as far as social media goes, it's definitely a way to get the word out on a platforms that are in the palm of people's hands versus on a billboard or on TV. And obviously cord cutters see so many fewer ads than people who used to watch broadcast. And this is the evolution and it'll keep evolving. And then there's the metaverse and so many other things that continue to evolve. So I think social media, if used for good, can spread word of like many causes, even when it comes to adopting dogs. And we both have a very soft spot for animal rescue. And I'll post a dog and somebody will adopt it. And that's amazing. So we're also now on the hunt for some murderer in Los Angeles that's running the streets who killed an innocent girl at her office, at her work, place of business. So when used for the right reasons and getting the word out about things that are impactful and not just promoting filters and manipulating images to the point where like that's just not an achievable look that anyone can attain. That's where there's the dark side. But hopefully you choose your own adventure and people lean toward the light or steer clear of it if it affects you negatively.
Yeah. So, from that perspective, I'm curious. I was smiling not because of the murder, but because of um, just like for you, there's such a broad sense of what you post, right? And the things that you do care about, whether it is animals. I know yeah, yoga being another thing, dating, and these various aspects. So I'm curious from your like, how do you? Because that's the other part, right? Nowadays, it's like there's our individual brands as well, right? And I think the term gets thrown around a little bit too loosely, but in that sense, like, how do you approach for you, with the various things that you're doing and which to post and which not to post?
So I think that's a great question. And I actually was thinking about it the other day because I have many friends that are close friends of mine, that I look at what they post and I'm like, that doesn't really align with who you are. And it makes me wonder about you and what's happening internally for you to post things like that, because maybe I've misjudged you, or maybe you don't know yourself well enough to know that what you're putting out there is actually unattractive. So for me, I'm pretty true to myself. I would say I have a pretty strong sense of awareness of who I am, who I want to be, and everything that I post about falls within that umbrella. I'm never going to post something that's super crude. I'm never going to post myself half naked, maybe in a bathing suit, but it's usually not gratuitous or just for likes. And if I do that, then I'll make a joke about it because I'm not that serious of person. And I also don't care enough about my aesthetic. I'm not personally trying to be an influencer. Sure, I influence, and it's the nature of having a podcast and being out there and a big network and all of the things. But I think that I try and stick with what feels right for me and what I would want to share with the people I care about and hope that they absorb or share further. So, my politics, my stance on mental health and, better, improving yourself, self improvement, my stance on therapy, my stance on animal rescue versus breeders, my stance on education, travel, all of these things. I think because I care so deeply about those topics, it's natural for me to share that information. And I personally am not going to take the time to write my own memes. So I'm glad that there are memes out there that make me laugh, that I'm like, you know what? The people that follow me know my sense of humor. Hopefully it makes them laugh too. And I get a lot of responses for the ridiculous things that I share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. To me, it's almost like a difference of if you try to influence somebody versus like, hey, here's just like a good message, right? Like that's if I had to encompass like what you said, I think, I don't know, that sounds like a fair way to me to
I
summarize
think
it.
so. I mean, my goal is not to pretend to be something I'm not, which is this person that's all knowing. But I will tell you, I'm a good filterer. And if I see something that inspires me, you know who I am as a human. I don't know if all my followers know me as a human, but hopefully they've picked up what I'm putting down or putting out there. So it's a message that is written more articulately than I used to blog. And at that point, I'm like, you know what? If I continued blogging, maybe I'd be an influencer because you'd be getting my authentic voice. And of course, with our podcast, sure, we do influence in some ways. My podcast is very specific to dating and relationships, but I'm also multifaceted. So there's all of these other things that I'm interested in that reign true to who I am as a person. So I would say I curate information that resonates with me and I share it. Whether you want to believe what I share or not, or follow suit or take action or whatever, that's on you guys, listeners and followers. That is I'm just serving you info that you can decide on your own. I don't try and take a strong stance, except sometimes there are topics I'm very passionate about where I get mad and I share like my very strong opinion, but I think at that point people can unfollow me or they can respond however they, deem fit. But I'm not trying to influence. I'm just sharing what I find valuable because I think that's the joy of social media is resource sharing and information sharing in a much quicker way than when we used to look in the Encyclopedia Britannica volumes 1 through 8.
Yeah.
And then we had to wait until the next segment came out and our parents had to get it for us. And that's how we retained information. But now it's in real time. You can share so much that it keeps people alert. Like even the other day when the COVID tests, the free COVID testing from the government came out, so many people were posting about the fact that we could get a couple free tests and how to do it. And I was like, if I didn't check the news that day, but I only checked social media, then I found out, thankfully, because what if I just was under a rock and didn't know or missed that news cycle and then I didn't get my 4 free COVID tests?
Yeah, absolutely. And shifting gears just a little bit, I'm curious, with so the podcast, it's called It's Complicated. You and Lauren,
We have
Leon.
another co-host now. We have Rob Evers who joined the show. So
Oh,
now we have a
officially.
male perspective and it's really shaking things up.
So yeah, I mean that I was going to ask about that, like, because you guys have been doing this a number of years. You guys have, as time goes by, right? We evolve, we change, and I know you're someone that was always striving to learn and better yourself. So in that sense, I'm just curious about the evolution of the show itself, like in terms of, not that this has to be like, what was the theory back then? What is it now? I know that sounds like the most like academic way of asking a question, but that's as close as I can come up to a.
Okay, so to start, it was an evolution of things. We were hosting it after Buzz TV. We realized we had a great rapport. We also realized every time we would recap a show, we would focus specifically on the relationships that we could, extract from the show. And that was a storyline that mattered the most to us. And so by the nature of working together, we also realized that there's an area of interest that pertains mostly to females, which is dating and relationships. We are on group chats with all of our girlfriends and we always ask each other for advice. And at some point you're like, how come you are making such bad choices, friend A? What are you doing wrong? And are you educating yourself? So the show was sort of a broadcast of our group chats and the topics that were being discussed in a more formidable way, but also an actionable way, because you can learn from something and then get homework from a guest that says, okay, now try it this way, or get my book, or work with me, or stop doing this, do that. And here are the 10 reasons why, or how to get over a breakup. So many useful tips and tricks that we just felt like everyone could benefit from it, specifically starting with women, but we've really covered a lot of topics that we hope males are listening to. So the evolution of the show was initially geared toward women and then has become since then a show for any gender or no gender, just people that are in relationships. And it is our hope that more people who wouldn't normally tune into this type of thing or who are searching for this type of information listen, because it's really relatable advice. We also share a lot about what's happening with us, and we are them. We're the audience. We're going through all the same stuff. We were dating through a pandemic. Lauren was dating a dad who had a child, and they created a blended family, and there was hurdles that she had to get through with that. And now we've got this co-host Rob, who is 45, single, an attractive male, figuring out his life and what's going on there and getting over some of his hurdles on the show. So it's a lot of fun. It's relatable. It's informative, but it's really just like hanging out with your friends and getting to hear how friends talk about these things and then come to the conclusion for you so you can put it into action. So I think as we grow, it's really more of that and hopefully broadening our audience. And what we really want to do is make talking about dating and relationships more comfortable for men specifically, because they're the ones who we feel fall short, unfortunately, because there aren't enough self-help books out there for men. Like I think the show Hitch movie Hitch was like a big concept at some point, that there was this guy that was a male that was teaching guys how to date, and then what happened? And now there's like the Matthew Hussies of the world and some other people out there, but it's not as generalized as it is for women. And so we really want to make it accessible, fun, not feel like it's any kind of gender specific, but really helpful to everybody.
Well, I'm going to make you make it a little bit gender. I'm curious, like from the guy's perspective, like what's the, I don't know, top 3 things missing that you feel like that they could improve on? Is it just self-awareness, or what is it?
Self-awareness for sure. And their profiles the ability to date is a skill set, like interviewing almost. Not everybody has it. It's not innate, and you have to practice. So it's also not a system where you get a lot of feedback. Like if you were to interview, or no one's yelping about you, so how are you going to know that you're doing it wrong? I guess unless you see you're not having much success. But then where do you turn from there, and how do you evaluate yourself and say, okay, where are the areas that I'm having trouble? So I'm a dater, I'm a single person, and I have so much feedback on it. One, because I'm analytical, and two, because I'm great at dating. And what's hard for me is that I'm good at dating, but the people I'm dating aren't always great. And so I wish I could shake them and be like, okay, you're doing this wrong. I'm sure you're a great person, but unfortunately, you are not presenting well. You're not asking good questions. You don't even know how to plan a date. You're only talking about you. And if you have no sense of urgency, I don't need a pen pal. I'm going to move on. There's so many things. So I actually have a theory about men and dating. Women too, but less so, because we do look for help more quickly and aptly from our friends and resources out there. But with men, here's the theory. You can tell me I'm wrong and to shove it, but men go from high school, whatever level of popularity they're in, but they see the same people all the time. There's a number of people that they can date in their small circle or big circle, depending on the school you went to or your extracurricular activities. Or you have a sibling and they've got a group of friends. Then they go to college. Now they might be in a relationship in college, but you don't have to do much in that relationship. You just go to a bar, you meet up, you do, like booty calls and things like that, or you go to games and you're hungover together and things like very college oriented activities that are also very inexpensive. Then you get out of college. Now, if the relationship continues, you're sort of bringing with you habits from college. You're not growing necessarily. And then often people will outgrow each other or break up after college because you're going back to different places. You get jobs in different places. And now you are a 20 something. You don't necessarily have an income that's significant to take people on dates or wine and dine and be, creative with what you're doing, or go on road trips, whatever the case. So you're limited in your activity, arena. But at that point, if you don't get into a relationship then or date a lot then, you've lacked all these skills. And then you're this adultier version of you. And now you don't know what you don't know because you missed out on that part. And so a lot of men in their, let's say, late 20s, early 30s are very bad at dating and have no idea, because there was a chunk of time where they got by with kind of doing the bare minimum, and then there was no feedback. And now they're creating dating profiles that are like geared toward other men and fart jokes and things like that, or sarcasm. It's like, on what planet do you think this is going to lure a girl in and tell her that you are a suitable partner for her? Because, by the way, she now makes money. She can stand on her own and she doesn't need you. So if you don't add to her life and impress her, we don't want you.
Yeah. See, what I love about you is that, like, that's such a healthy way of thinking. My worry is this, like, effed up war of attrition in a way, not intentional, but the posts I see from women, like, just like guys shooting their shot of, like, I'm just gonna quote, right, like, nice tits, or like what. It's like, you think that's gonna work? And so my worry is that, like, by that standard, if that's like, okay, that's most of like what's being thrown out there, the first guy that's like, hey, how's your day? Then all of a sudden it's like, that's godsend. And it's like, well, no. And so that's why I appreciate you, because you still are maintaining these high standards of, like, just because a guy says, like, hey, how's your day, doesn't mean he's like heaven sent to earth or whatever.
Lord, no. But I mean, I also hate when somebody asks how my day is. So,
okay. So for all the guys out there, what's a perfect opener?
Something about the girl's profile. And if there's nothing there.
Well, yeah, that's right. Like, yeah, what if there's nothing?
Okay, so there's images. There's also like world events. There's also things going on. Like if there's a long holiday weekend, you can ask what they did for the weekend. Or if you're how was your day is too broad. It's also too broad when you ask somebody, what does your week look like? Or like, without having an actual goal or being specific, it's too broad and it's boring and it doesn't move the needle. So people need to get more specific. And also, if somebody was approaching you, wouldn't you want them to have done at least the bare minimum, which is read your profile and come up with something pertaining to you, and not just they copy and paste it to every guy and actually you're just a number. When I respond well, it's to people who put thought in, effort, who are seemingly excited about me, because that is what I'm like, oh, so you find value in my profile out of the sea of women out there who are all attractive, especially in LA. And you want to get to know me on a real level. Now, it may not pan out because we might not have good banter, or maybe I like somebody else more that I'm talking to. So it fizzles out, or we just don't have chemistry, or they don't like me. Who knows? But at least it's off to a much better start that it can catapult from there. When it starts dead in the water, it's obviously going to be dead in the water. So set yourself up for better success and quicker success if you actually come to the table with something.
Gotcha. That's a good viewpoint. Now, let me ask you this. I love how this is where we're going with it. How do you describe yourself without bragging? Maybe, I don't know. It's tough, right? Like, I don't know. Obviously it's a personal question for me because what do you do and things like that. And I don't know how to answer. Like, I don't want to answer like, I'm a podcast producer, and then they're like, who do you work with? And then I have to list out all the celebs that I work with. They're like, oh, that's, you know what I mean? It's just, I don't know where the fine line is of like being truthful and honest without being like, hey, I'm kind of a big shot. Cause I don't look at I don't look at myself that way at all.
I think high level is probably a good way to go, and not super specific. I mean, I obviously describe myself as I work in influencer marketing. I'm an account director there, and I also host a podcast, and I'm also now recently signed up to get my real estate license. And if I were to go further into who I am as a human, not just a professional, I'm somebody who loves to spend time with my friends and family. I love to travel. I love to relax. And I really love spending time with my dog. I also am learning French, and I work out. You can decide if those things are good or bad, or if I'm bragging or not. That's just how you perceive me. But those are the facts.
Yeah. No, that's a good way. I forget who said it, but yeah, like even in person, like when you introduce yourself, like, hi, Jen, my name is Phil. I'm a podcast producer. I enjoy soccer, and I too am learning French, right? So you give them like what you do, what you're interested in, and, kind of what you're learning. So it gives them a little bit of broad, and it also just allows them to have more commonality, right?
Absolutely.
So,
and get a better picture of who you are full circle, not just in one area. I wouldn't lead with like, I'm a award-winning account director at an influencer marketing agency. I'm paid the most. I'm the most respected. I also talk to celebrities all day, and everyone likes me on the apps. Like, hello. Imagine.
I mean, I say get it.
There are people though out there that do that, and I think you are who you are, and you react to things the way you react to them. So someone will find that not bragging, and somebody might find that to be very braggadocious, but I skew more factual. So I'm like, you want to ask more about any one of these things that I do, by all means, have at it. But this is who I am. And if you want somebody in your life like that, whether to hire, whether to be friends with, whether to date, I'm like, know what's on the table here. This is it.
Yeah. Shifting gears yet again, just because my mind jumps around in so many ways, but obviously you have so many interests, right? And I've known you, you always care about your friends. Like whenever they need you, you're there for them in that sense. How do you manage your time? Because you you're learning French because you like to travel and all this different, like there's just so many aspects to you. And so how do the balls get juggled?
Woof, man. It's a challenge. I will say that first and foremost, it's not easy. I try my hardest to be structured and routine oriented. It's my nature to be. So that I have on my side, definitely, because I know there are people who like to be more flexible and spontaneous and don't like structure and don't like to-do lists and they like to just like go with the flow. I'm not that person. I like to build structure and know what the plan is. And then I can go with the flow after the plan is built because there's a foundation and I can pick and choose there, after that. But for me, I wake up at a certain time and my mornings, I have a morning routine. So, on the subject of working out and French, I open my eyes, I listen to a news podcast while I walk the dog, come back, make coffee, and practice my French. Then I work out, and then I'm on my laptop, for the duration of the day doing work. And then sometimes I'll take breaks and work on the podcast outline. And then after work, I'll do more work on whatever else it is that's extracurricular for me. And after that, then maybe I'll go out with friends or a date, or I will make time to stay in and relax. I will never book myself out every night where I'm either working or going out, because that's how you burn out. And then you spread yourself way too thin and are crappy at everything and hate your life and resentful of all the things. So I try and be as structured as possible. I also try and be as good to myself as possible. So if I realize that there's one morning where I need to sleep in a little bit, the first thing that goes is working out, not French. French is like not even that much time. I know you're much better at the app than I am. We all use Duolingo and, we cheer for each other when we hit milestones. But for me, I do 2 lessons, maybe 3, and that's it. I'm not going to sit there and belabor it and go down a deep French hole, but I do my 2 to 3 lessons, get in my 30 XP for the day, and move on to the next thing. So I think it's being flexible with your schedule and your structure, having the structure though to begin with, so you at least know what the game plan is, and then you prioritize where you go from there, how much time you're going to dedicate, what's going to bring you the most value and make you feel the most accomplished. I was listening to a Jay Shetty podcast the other day, and he's like, am I having an efficient week or an effective week? And that's something that's really important as well, is to delineate between being efficient and like front loading your day and getting all this stuff done. But did you actually move the needle in any of those things? Did you chip away at anything? Did you make an impact anywhere? Where are the results at?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally, that resonates with me. Years ago at this point, I did a lesson about like, listen, you can be an effective, like, let's say you have to get a message out and you literally just go door to door. That's effective. Or no, it's efficient, but is it effective? Right? You want to be effective. And so it's like, if you can just blast an email out to people and they're going to respond to it, you don't need to go door to door.
Right.
So
exactly.
100%. Are you good at saying no? Like the idea, let's say if you had something planned, are you good at saying no if like, hey, you got tired or something like that? I'm just curious because it's a big topic in self-help of like, the ability to say no.
I am great at boundaries. I pick and choose though where I apply them. So if it's something that's not going to bring me joy, I don't go. If it's something that I know maybe I'm tired, but once I get there, it will fill my cup. Yes. So I went out one night the end of last year with some of my girlfriends, and we were all saying how exhausted we were. But once we got to our favorite night, jazz night, we all felt immediately invigorated and energized. And I was sharing with them my perspective on it because they were like, oh, we could have canceled if everybody was tired. I'm like, no. When I hang out with you guys, it actually doesn't take a lot of brain power and it doesn't feel like work. It brings me joy. It makes me feel loved. It makes me feel supported, and it makes me laugh and smile. And we do group hugs and it's a whole love fest. When I go on a date, with like a first date or something like that, it feels like work. It feels like a job interview. It feels like something that you're not guaranteed that it's going to be a success. I know if I go out with my girlfriends, always a success. The return on investment is very high, but the date might drain me. And then I'm exhausted the next day because I went from working to podcasting potentially, and then on a date and so much talking and energy spent. And then like go to sleep, rinse, wash, repeat, start again. And it's not enough to, I think, energize and be self-care. But I'm great at saying no if it's going to be something that isn't going to bite me in the ass later. Like, I would never say no to a friend's birthday unless I truly couldn't make it. I said no to a dinner tonight. I prioritized this podcast, and I knew that what's this one more dinner going to do for my life? It's just, I could go after, but why would I want to go out late on a Wednesday when I have work the next day? I want to do my workout in the morning. There's so many things that I will sacrifice just for a dinner.
How did you get to I think people get to that sort of thinking either because they've been burned and, the lesson has been forcefully taught upon them, or they have had a good influence, or I'm trying to think of other possibilities, but those are the two that stand out. So I'm curious, like, how you got to that point.
I think many things got me here, like growing, knowing myself better, and experiencing certain things that rubbed me the wrong way, and maybe doing it a couple times and then realizing, all right, my intention was really spot on. I should have listened to it. My intuition of not going was the right choice, and I shouldn't have gone, because now here I am again. So that happens, a couple of times, and you evaluate, and then that sets the standard, I guess. But I don't think that I've had anyone really that has helped me with boundaries. It's more me and my gut check with myself. And because I am so structured and organized, I would see the sacrifice in my structure, and I thrive on structure. So if you take away my morning routine, I'm like all out of whack throughout the day. So also, when you hang out with somebody and you don't feel good after, like, stop hanging out with that person. Basically, I go with feeling first and then make my decisions, based on it's thinking first, then feeling and checking in with myself, and then deciding. But I think people need to get more comfortable with boundaries, but people don't understand the difference between saying no strategically and just saying no to say no, because sometimes saying no hurts other people, and you have to understand how to deliver the no in a way that's not, I don't want to say selfish, because people feel like, oh, if I have boundaries, I'm being selfish. Or if people have boundaries, other people are like, you're selfish. It's not that. You have to know how to convey why you're saying the no, and other people have to take it and accept it. The worst thing you can do is challenge somebody on their boundary, because it's hard enough for people to set boundaries. So if somebody's saying no, it's kind of like, no means no. That age old saying that's not really that complicated. No means no, doesn't mean maybe or yes. So understanding the why and then just accepting it, I think, is okay, and how we should operate.
Yeah, for me, I try to create like a general rule, so that way it's not personal, number one. But I also, for me this year, I'm really trying to get better at just saying thank you and no. Like literally just that phrase, like, I appreciate the invite. No.
And that's great, because you're sharing your appreciation for being considered, and you're making a choice that works for you. The worst thing, though, is when you see somebody set a boundary and then you see them do something that's entirely hypocritical. That's where it's hard to accept somebody's boundaries and not take it personally, or think of them as like a selfish person that, is making choices sort of ad hoc based on a case by case situation where you're the case that they chose to say no. So I think we all should just come from a place of kindness, but also being kind to ourselves.
Yeah. It's hard, speaking of that, like, it's really hard. Like I look at, I try to operate from that place of empathy all the time. And the hardest thing is always having to check myself, because there is that knee-jerk reaction of like, F this person, they're so stupid or whatever, especially in this polarized climate we live in. I don't know, how do you balance that aspect of it? Because it's difficult. Like some days I'm okay with it, other days I fail miserably, and I look back on that like, ooh, maybe not the right choice.
I don't know. I think it's hard, and it's an evolution of growth. And the more we know ourselves and how we operate. We should be empathetic toward other people, but people do questionable things. And it's hard not to like take it personally or judge them or be mad, be mad at them or annoyed by them. I think it's how we react out loud. Maybe we need to sit with our feeling and see, are we taking it the wrong way? Or should we just give them a free pass because maybe they're going through something? If the pandemic taught us anything, I think it's to have a little bit of patience with people because we're not in their shoes. And even when it comes to COVID, everyone had COVID very differently. My case was really light. So when people are sobbing about it at home and, complaining about having a fever, I'm like, well, mine was 99.5 at most. So I'm not, assuming that they're being dramatic. It's just we all have very different experiences with everything in life and have to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt and assume positive intent. Sure, people can have negative intent, but we should assume positive. Going back to your question though about how I learned to like sort of have balance and time management and all that, I think the pandemic helped solidify what brought me joy and where I need to allow myself to just relax and hang out at home because I really like being home. Sure, I don't want to be home every single day. I have massive cabin fever by the end of the week. But when it comes to how we entertained ourselves over the pandemic, we found ways to do it. We watched TV, we made banana bread, we worked out, we did virtual every activity you could do. People attended museum openings, through Zoom. So played games, all sorts of things, so we found a way to keep ourselves busy and had fun for the most part while doing it for however long we had fun doing it. And then we got sick of it. But when left to our own devices, we could have fun at home. So I used to in college, and I had a boyfriend and he was older and had a great home. And he would be like, come stay here all the time. And I was like, no, I cannot. I don't live with you. And I need some time to do the things I like watch reality TV, work out. I don't want to lose myself in you because I'm getting in your routine and your home and your TV schedule and your cooking and all that. So I would make sure that I slept home either 3 or 4 nights a week so that I had separation to just be Jenifer. And sure, maybe we would talk on the phone and stay connected, but I got to do things in my own space on my own time. And it was really great. So I sort of carried that with me throughout life. And then during the pandemic, I really enjoyed my time with me, and I live alone. So I didn't want to lose that when we started going out again and doing those things. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make sure that I stay home certain nights. I remember somebody asking me like what my plans were once. And I was like, to stay home. They're like, that's not a plan. I was like, no, for me, that's a plan. I have plans with my dog. We're ordering sushi, drinking wine, and watching whatever the show is that I feel like watching. So I'm busy. You might not think that's busy, but to me, solid plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I relate to that very much so. And going into the idea, because so the idea with the boyfriend, right, and having enough space for you, I think that's key. Because I don't know if you notice this, but there's like one sign of an unhealthy relationship to me is just codependence. And for me, and one of my struggles is I don't know how to necessarily communicate that or if it needs to be communicated in any sort of way, but this idea like, no, I want like whoever my significant other would be, it's like, I want you to have interests, like I want to hear what's going on in your day, but like, I want you to have your friends that you can hang out with because I want my friends that I want to hang out with. I want to go to soccer and like whatever soccer is for you, you do that, and then we can come together and we can share and rejoice and you tell me about this. And then we also have shared activities. And like that to me is a fun relationship as opposed to like, hey, want to go shopping? Like, no, we don't need to do all the crap together.
Well, I think how you said it makes sense. And communication is really the key to anything because you don't want to have resentment or you don't want to be distant and pull away and then the other person take it personally or think that you're losing interest or what have you. But communicating that you are a full person with a full life and they are additive and an important part of your life, but you cannot do everything together because you are people with lives. So I think it's just communicating that you are interested in the person and that you care about them, but you are two separate people that are a couple. You are not one person doing one life, doing every activity together. That's unhealthy. And if somebody does come to the table with that expectation, that's a clear sign that they have codependency, because they attribute you doing everything with them to how you feel about them. And the minute you have to do that, you want to do something else, they fear you're pulling away. And that's also insecure attachment. It's a lot of things that create problems further down the road. And you got to nip that in the bud early on so you actually stop the habit.
Yeah, absolutely. I have three main mantras of like dating, and let me know if this is like a good way to approach it. Number one, if you're not free to leave, you're not free to stay. Number two, this borrowing from Brene Brown, like this is more for like a serious relationship. Like, you know, 100% is like the ideal, right? And so if at some points someone's carrying like 60% of the load, maybe 70, and the other person's carrying that 30, and if collectively both people are tired and they're like, hey, I'm at a 40 today, I'm at a 30, it's like, how do we make up for that other percentage of like, all right, let's order Postmates for food because we don't want to cook, whatever, let's get a nanny because none of us want to take care of the kids right now, right? So that. And then the third is I'm less interested about commonality of people's interests, more about how they handle disagreements. If they can agree on that, then I think the rest is all doable. So those are my three.
All of that makes sense. I guess my first question though for you is, why would somebody not be free to leave?
Think of every like toxic relationship you ever thought, like whether guys or women, but more so women, they're like, when they say, I felt like I couldn't leave that relationship, that's what I'm talking about. And then, by the way, this applies to like jobs as well. When you're like, oh, I feel like I'm stuck at this job or whatever, and oftentimes like in a toxic work environment, because they say like, oh, we're family, we're this and that. And then it slips into like that cult-like status where, yeah, you're not really free to leave. And so if you're not free to leave, you were never free to stay because it's manipulative.
Get that. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with freedom in general. I am a big proponent of making choices, and the world will just figure it out as they have before you and after you. So if you're assuming that you are not free to do anything, then you have relinquished control of your life and taken also no accountability for what you bring to any situation. So you're putting the responsibility, the onus, the blame on circumstances rather than the fact that you can change it. So I believe in freedom. If you aren't free to do something, check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to that, like a more specific example, like people find it weird, they're like, do you ever get jealous? Like if like, for example, my past relationship, she had a lot of guy friends and things like that. And they're like, don't you get jealous? And she would ask me like, don't you at all? And I'm like, no, I trust you. And like, for me, that is trust. I trust you. And if you cheat on me and stuff like that, oh, we're done. But I'm not going to like play that game with,
Right. Like you had the option to date me. You also have the option not to date me. I have the option to date you. I don't have to date you. So if you're making choices that break that agreement, that's the choice.
Yeah.
And everyone's free to go. But so to your second point about the percentages and what people bring to the relationship, that's where people get stuck in taking or I guess keeping count and taking score. And
oh, that happens in friendships too, of like the tit for tat, and I just like, I did you this favor. And it's like that to me, I look at it, is there an equal sense? Like if I know that I needed you, I know like you would be there for me, but I'm not going to be like, well, last year I did X, Y, and Z for you. So when are you going to pay up? Like, I'm not interested.
I always call it like unrolling the scroll, because that's when people are like, all right, here's where we were on this day. Or it's like putting together a case. I'm like, oh my God, didn't realize you were tracking my every move and keeping score. But to your point about finding the shortcuts that make all parties happy when you need it, I think you have to agree first on that being the approach, because Otherwise, people will point the finger and say, like you're saying, I do everything. I did this. I always empty the dishwasher. You never do. Or I just what the complaint I hear the most is I just want this person to do this thing. It's like, well, did you communicate it? Did you express how important it is and why? Also, why do you want them to do it? Because can't you just hire a housekeeper and both of you say, neither of us have to do the chore we hate, rather than you attributing it to how they feel about you or how they think about you? Because you're like, well, they should see that I'm so tired, or they can just see that you're both tired and hire somebody. I think the only place it gets a little bit hairy is when it's financial and somebody, maybe doesn't have extra money for these shortcuts. But if you do, then doing that thing helps everybody and prevents resentment.
Yeah.
So do it.
Yeah. And, it just comes down to the communication aspect, right? I mean, that's because the whole notion is predicated, as like Brene Brown would say, you have to come to the table and it'd be like, hey, how you feeling today? And I would say, you know what? I'm at 40 today. And you would give your honest answer. So it's like, all right, let's figure this out together, as opposed to just guesswork, right? And I think tying it in with everything else, like the kindness and empathy aspect of it, it's all about just listen to people.
I think listening, but also feeling comfortable and communicating and knowing how, which it goes back to like, you listen to Brene Brown. I listen to Brene Brown. I also have a podcast. So I listen to a bazillion experts. I listen to Jay Shetty. So to me, communicating isn't scary. And I'm not trying to be a cool girl in any situation. I'm just trying to be a girl who survives. So for me, that's communicating my feelings, boundaries, expectations, what have you, insecurities, whatever. So when somebody doesn't, and then they start to go down a rabbit hole of what other things mean, because you infer things, one, you're coming from your own lens and your lens might be askew. And then you're deciding that other person's actions are a direct correlation to this thing you've assigned value to. And that just doesn't make any sense at all, and is like a web you have created of lies. So you could just ask the person, how are you feeling? And I think your point of saying in the morning, let's just say, I'm at this and you're at that. You're treating each other like human beings who are first, it's like the saying, you got to put your mask on before helping others. How are you going to expect somebody to be a full partner that day if they're not a full person that day? You can't have the same expectations of somebody. So a lot of times when people are in these codependent relationships, they expect the moon, the sun, and the stars just because somebody has agreed to be in a relationship with them. But that's also then canceling out the person's relationship with themselves, their other people in their lives, their jobs, how they feel mentally that day, like their emotional quotient that day, all of the things that pertain just to that individual. You're basically saying, null and void, because you're just my boyfriend or girlfriend or my husband, my wife, my fiance, what have you. And you're assigning that role a greater brevity than, them being just a human being on the planet first. So I think when it comes to communication, you have to also remember there's like many, many layers to a human being. Your relationship is one aspect of their lives, and you have to be understanding. And if you do want to give more that day, it's not because you always give more, and it's not because they give less all the time and care less about you. It's because you chose to. For me, it's pretty easy to give more because I joke, I'm built for like Chernobyl. I have a lot of stamina, I would say, that comes from just being a Capricorn rock of a person. And I grew up fast as a child, but that's not necessarily the case for everybody. So they might have less to give when they are running on less. It's my choice to stay or go. And it's my choice to contribute or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you have certainly filled my cup of tea in that sense. I've gained a lot from this. I could continue on in so many different ways, but I'll allow you. Is there anything that you would like to share? Could be about anything we've talked about or something completely different before we wrap out.
I think that we covered a lot, but I do suggest that everybody listening tune into my podcast, because there's these subjects and more on there as it relates to dating and relationship and self-care and how to approach 2022, everything we survived in 2021, the nuances to dating and relationships for every gender, and always work on yourself, because it starts with you. And if you're not good, you're not going to be good at other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's complicated, and all the major podcast apps, right?
Yep, everywhere. And you can follow me on Instagram and all that at Jenifer Golden. And you can date me on any of the dating apps.
Wow, that might be the best plug for last. Anyway, thanks, Jen. I appreciate you. And if you guys have any questions, post our interview, comment down below, and I'll certainly be answering and things like that. And if it builds enough, maybe we can do a part 2 with Jen.